February 19, 1945. Dawn breaks over Iwo Jima's volcanic sands, pale light cutting through the haze of smoke and ash. The distant thunder of naval guns rolls like an ominous drumbeat, echoing across the jagged coastline. A cold wind carries the acrid scent of cordite and burning earth, while the ground trembles under the relentless pounding of artillery. Amid the chaos, a lone figure moves with a purpose beyond fear. A Marine, sweat-streaked with soot, crouches behind a ridge of black sand. In his hands, an aircraft-mounted .50 caliber machine gun, meant for strafing planes above, is reimagined for the infantry fight below. Heavy, unwieldy, yet deadly. Around him, comrades fall into craters, disappearing into smoke, yet he advances. Every step is measured, every shot deliberate. The roar of the improvised weapon cuts through the morning fog, a new kind of thunder on a battlefield already steeped in legend. One man, one gun, and an unstoppable will. Across the ridge, enemy fortifications await, unaware that a single Marine is about to change the course of a small but pivotal fight. The story of ingenuity, courage, and sheer determination begins here. February 1945. The Pacific War had raged for nearly 4 years. From the coral atolls of the Central Pacific to the ash-strewn islands near Japan, the United States and its allies had fought with grim determination to push closer to the Japanese homeland. Every island taken was another step toward victory, but also a reminder of the immense human cost. Among these islands, none loomed larger in the minds of American strategists than Iwo Jima. Rising from the Pacific like a black sentinel, Iwo Jima was barely 8 square miles of volcanic rock. Its dark beaches were lined with hidden defenses, its slopes scarred by tunnels and bunkers that allowed the Japanese defenders to strike and vanish without warning. For the Americans, the island was strategically critical. 3 airfields, capable of launching fighter escorts and emergency landings for bombers, could tip the balance in the final push toward Tokyo. The Imperial Japanese Army, well aware of its importance, had transformed Iwo Jima into a fortress. Nearly 22,000 troops entrenched themselves in a network of tunnels, pillboxes, and cleverly concealed artillery emplacements. The Marines approaching Iwo Jima carried the weight of both expectation and fear. Experience from previous assaults, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, had taught them that Japanese defenses were merciless and that every step forward would cost blood. Commanders briefed their men with maps and diagrams, yet none could fully convey the sheer horror of what awaited on those black sand beaches. The volcanic ash itself, soft yet treacherous, slowed movement and revealed every footstep to hidden snipers. Smoke from pre-landing bombardments hung thick over the landscape, mingling with the scent of seawater and burning oil, creating a disorienting, almost surreal battlefield. On the morning of the invasion, waves of Marines poured from landing craft under a storm of enemy fire. Mortars, machine guns, and artillery rained down as men struggled through knee-deep volcanic ash toward the cliffs. Communication was fragmented, pre-planned strategies collided with the unpredictability of combat. Officers shouted orders, but the battle required more than doctrine. It demanded adaptation, improvisation, and courage beyond measure. Within this maelstrom, the significance of every weapon, every decision, and every soldier became magnified. Standard infantry rifles were often inadequate against fortified positions. Heavy machine guns provided cover but were slow to reposition. Flamethrowers and grenades offered temporary reprieve, yet the Japanese defenses were resilient, their underground networks allowing them to strike again and again. In this environment, Marines were forced to think creatively, to repurpose whatever tools were at hand. It was in this crucible of necessity that certain acts of innovation emerged. Among them, one Marine's decision to transform an aircraft-mounted gun into a handheld instrument of destruction exemplified the extremes of adaptation on Iwo Jima. The gun, originally designed to bring death from the sky, would now sow chaos among entrenched defenders, turning air power into a personal arsenal. Yet the backdrop of this innovation was not simply mechanical, it was also human. The Marines were exhausted, having endured weeks of relentless training and the psychological strain of knowing the casualties to come. Letters from home, memories of friends lost in previous campaigns, and the raw desire to survive all coexisted with a sense of duty. The volcanic landscape, with its treacherous cliffs and hidden bunkers, became both enemy and classroom, a place where ingenuity and courage would be tested in the harshest conditions imaginable. By the end of the first day, the American forces had secured a tenuous foothold on Iwo Jima, but the island was far from conquered. Every advance came at a steep cost, and every victory required the Marine to confront both physical danger and mental exhaustion. In these opening hours, the conditions were set for extraordinary acts, moments where ordinary men became legends, and where improvisation could shift the balance of life and death. The stage was set. The volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima would soon witness the ingenuity, courage, and relentless determination of a single Marine who would turn an aircraft gun into a handheld weapon of devastation. Life on Iwo Jima was relentless. After the initial landings, Marines dug in on black sand beaches, contending with searing heat by day and bitterly cold winds at night. The volcanic ash, soft and unstable, slowed every movement, sapped strength, and clung to uniforms and weapons, turning simple tasks into exhausting efforts. Medical teams worked frantically, treating burns, shrapnel wounds, and infections that spread quickly in the tropical humidity. Field hospitals were makeshift, and evacuation of the wounded often required perilous treks under enemy fire. Supplies were equally tenuous. Food, water, ammunition, and medical stores arrived in waves, but the chaos of landing craft and the unpredictability of artillery fire meant shortages were constant. Marines often shared rations and improvised repairs on weapons and equipment, understanding that survival depended on ingenuity as much as courage. Communication lines were fragile. Radios were bulky, sometimes non-functional under constant bombardment, and runners carried orders at the risk of death. In such conditions, every decision, every improvisation, and every act of courage could change the tide of a small engagement, and by extension, the larger battle. Weapons were both a lifeline and a symbol of adaptation. Standard rifles provided range, but lacked the stopping power against fortified positions. Flamethrowers were effective, but limited in ammunition and mobility. Artillery offered overwhelming firepower, but required careful coordination and time to reload and reposition. Machine guns gave suppressive fire, but were heavy and vulnerable in open terrain. The combination of entrenched Japanese positions and rugged volcanic terrain forced Marines to think creatively. Every hill, crater, and bunker became both an obstacle and an opportunity. It was in these conditions that battlefield innovation emerged, not as experimentation, but as necessity. Engineers and ordnance specialists worked to modify equipment for immediate use. Soldiers repurposed demolition charges, reinforced cover, and sometimes turned weapons designed for other platforms into infantry tools. One notable example was the adaptation of aircraft-mounted .50 caliber machine guns. Originally built to defend bombers against enemy planes, these guns could deliver devastating firepower if carried into close combat, though at extreme risk to the operator. Their weight and recoil made them difficult to manage, but the promise of concentrated fire against entrenched enemies outweighed the danger. Morale and psychological resilience were constantly tested. Letters from home were rare, news from other theaters of war brought mixed relief and dread. Yet the Marines pressed forward, driven by duty, camaraderie, and the instinct to survive. Small victories, capturing a bunker, securing a ridge, rescuing a wounded comrade, were celebrated quietly amidst the chaos. Each Marine had to balance fear with determination, improvisation with discipline, and individual initiative with unit cohesion. The Japanese defenders, meanwhile, were equally determined and methodical. They had spent years preparing the island for an inevitable invasion. Underground tunnels, concealed bunkers, and cleverly placed artillery allowed them to strike unpredictably. Counterattacks were fierce and often sudden, exploiting every gap in the American advance. The Marines quickly learned that every assault required more than sheer numbers. It required adaptability, coordination, and at times, extraordinary acts of ingenuity. It was within this grueling environment that the stage was set for one Marine to push the limits of improvisation. When the opportunity arose, he would take an aircraft gun designed for air combat and wield it as a handheld weapon, combining raw firepower with human courage in a way that stunned both allies and enemies. The volcanic battlefield, relentless and unforgiving, demanded that extraordinary measures be taken, and that ordinary men could become legends in moments of necessity. From this foundation, we can begin to explore the different perspectives and angles that illuminate not just the weapon or the action, but the human, technological, tactical, and moral dimensions of the story. Human angle. Amid the chaos of Iwo Jima, human endurance was tested beyond imagination. Marines faced not only enemy fire, but also the constant weight of fear, fatigue, and the unforgiving volcanic terrain. The Marine at the center of this story exemplified a rare blend of resilience and calculated aggression. Each step forward across the black sands carried both risk and purpose. Bloodied hands gripped the repurposed aircraft gun, sweat mingled with ash, and yet his focus never wavered. Fear, in many accounts, was not absence of courage, but its companion. Witnesses described moments where Marines froze briefly under fire, then surged forward with renewed resolve. The psychological burden of seeing friends fall in front of you was immense, yet it also forged bonds that allowed improvisation to succeed. The Marine who wielded the aircraft gun relied on instinct sharpened by training, yet every choice was filtered through the lens of survival and duty. Human ingenuity was inseparable from human will. Both became weapons on the battlefield. Tactical angle. Iwo Jima demanded tactical flexibility. Japanese defenders had constructed overlapping fields of fire, utilizing bunkers and hidden artillery to punish advancing units. Conventional frontal assaults often proved deadly, forcing Marines to adapt. Small unit tactics, combined with individual initiative, became essential. The Marines' decision to use an aircraft gun on foot transformed a tactical dilemma into opportunity. Traditional infantry weapons struggled against reinforced positions, but the .50 caliber's range and destructive power allowed a single operator to neutralize bunkers previously impervious to rifle and grenade. This tactical innovation was not planned at headquarters, it arose from necessity. Every trench, bunker, and ridge became a chessboard, and improvisation gave the Marines a new piece with devastating effect. The terrain itself shaped tactics. Volcanic ash slowed movement, craters offered cover, and the ever-present risk of artillery demanded swift, decisive action. Technological angle. Technology on Iwo Jima was a double-edged sword. Standard issue rifles, grenades, flamethrowers, and artillery were all optimized for conventional infantry engagement, yet the unique environment demanded adaptation. The aircraft-mounted .50 caliber machine gun, originally designed to intercept enemy planes, had never been intended for close-quarters combat on volcanic beaches. Transforming it into a handheld weapon required both physical strength and technical understanding. Modifications included reinforcing mounts, creating a portable carriage, and calibrating firing mechanisms to account for recoil in a foot soldier's hands. The result was a fusion of human ingenuity and mechanical power, a weapon capable of delivering sustained, precise fire against entrenched defenders. In this sense, the Marine became a living extension of the technology, merging human skill with mechanical lethality. Leadership angle. Leadership on Iwo Jima was a constant interplay between planning and adaptability. Commanders provided strategy, objectives, and coordination, yet the brutal reality of the battlefield required initiative at the individual level. Officers understood that survival and success often depended on decentralized decision-making. In this context, the Marine who repurposed an aircraft gun was both a product and a reflection of effective leadership. While High Command set the overall objective, the capture of key ridges and airfields, it was the encouragement of initiative, coupled with trust in the training of enlisted men, that allowed improvisation to flourish. Non-commissioned officers and squad leaders empowered their men to make split-second decisions when orders met unforeseen resistance. The Marines' action was a microcosm of this dynamic. Leadership created the conditions for ingenuity, yet it was personal courage and quick thinking that transformed potential into decisive impact. Enemy angles. The Japanese defenders of Iwo Jima had spent years fortifying the island. Their tactics emphasized stealth, patience, and precision. Hidden bunkers and interconnected tunnels allowed them to emerge unexpectedly, striking Marines with lethal force and then disappearing into the volcanic landscape. Their philosophy relied on attrition. Every Marine lost was a small victory. Every position held was strategic leverage. Against such an enemy, conventional firepower often proved insufficient. Japanese soldiers were trained to withstand bombardment and counterattack relentlessly. The appearance of a Marine wielding an aircraft gun on foot introduced an entirely new variable. Bunkers that had repelled squads of men fell to the concentrated firepower delivered by a single operator. Enemy strategy, meticulous as it was, could not account for this unexpected adaptation. It was a stark reminder that ingenuity can disrupt even the most disciplined and prepared defenses. Moral angles. War is measured not only in victories, but in choices. The act of transforming a weapon designed for the skis into one for close combat posed moral and ethical considerations. The Marines' objective was clear: neutralize threats, protect comrades, and achieve mission objectives. Yet each pull of the trigger carried immense human consequences. Accounts from surviving Marines highlight the tension between duty and the burden of destruction. Every bunker destroyed, every enemy soldier incapacitated, was a testament to skill and necessity, but also a stark reminder of war's human cost. The moral dimension of improvisation, choosing the most effective, sometimes unconventional method to save lives or gain ground, reveals the paradox of battlefield ethics. Survival often demands decisions that weigh ingenuity against humanity. February 21, 1945. The second day of the Iwo Jima invasion had begun under a sky choked with smoke and the acrid scent of cordite. The American foothold on the island was tenuous. Craters scarred the volcanic sand, and every ridge was a potential death trap. Japanese machine guns, mortars, and hidden snipers exacted a heavy toll on advancing Marines. Movement was measured, deliberate, and painfully slow. Amid this chaos, one Marine carried a weapon that defied convention. The aircraft-mounted .50 caliber gun, transformed into a portable instrument of destruction, rumbled with raw power. It was heavy, requiring him to brace his body, leverage his strength, and calculate every recoil, but the results were undeniable. Enemy bunkers that had withstood hours of coordinated rifle and artillery fire were now vulnerable to concentrated bursts from a single soldier. The first engagement came on a small ridge overlooking a network of Japanese fortifications. The Marine advanced under intermittent fire, using the terrain's craters and folds as cover. With each calculated burst, the aircraft gun tore through sandbags and reinforced bunkers, cutting off enemy fire lanes and creating a corridor for his squad to advance. The enemy's counterfire intensified, yet the Marine adapted, repositioning the heavy weapon with methodical precision, almost as if the gun itself were an extension of his body. Witnesses later recounted the surreal nature of the scene: one man, alone against fortified positions, turning a weapon of air combat into a handheld instrument of terror. Each bunker neutralized shifted the momentum for his unit. What had been a grinding struggle became a sequence of localized victories, with the Marines' ingenuity tipping the balance. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical one. Japanese defenders, trained to rely on static positions and overlapping fields of fire, found their strategies disrupted. The sudden appearance of such concentrated firepower in unpredictable locations forced them to retreat, regroup, or abandon positions entirely. For the Marines following his lead, morale soared. The improvised gun offered not only suppressive fire, but a symbol of possibility, proof that ingenuity could overcome even the most forbidding obstacles. At the squad level, coordination became critical. The Marines' fellow soldiers provided cover, relayed information on enemy positions, and assisted in moving the weapon when possible. The integration of individual brilliance into unit tactics highlighted the interplay of courage, adaptability, and teamwork. Every burst of fire opened new paths, allowing his comrades to advance, secure flanks, and reduce exposure to lethal crossfire. This was no isolated skirmish. The actions of a single Marine had ripple effects across the battlefield. Commanding officers took note, and after-action reports emphasized the importance of improvisation under fire. The weapon itself, originally intended for aircraft defense, became a case study in adaptation, mechanical power harnessed by human ingenuity in a way that dramatically altered a small but crucial sector of the Iwo Jima beachhead. As the morning wore on, the Marine pressed forward relentlessly. His movements, though cautious, were unyielding. Each engagement was brief but decisive. The roar of the gun cut through the fog of battle, a new kind of thunder against fortified Japanese positions. By mid-morning, several critical bunkers had been silenced, enemy counterattacks disrupted, and the squad's advance secured. The turning point was clear. A weapon reimagined, wielded by a single Marine, had shifted the tactical balance in a sector that had previously seemed impenetrable. What had been a battle of attrition became a story of innovation, courage, and relentless willpower. The volcanic battlefield, chaotic and lethal, bore witness to a moment where one individual's adaptation reshaped the immediate flow of combat. From this point, the battle's momentum began to favor the Marines, setting the stage for further advances and foreshadowing the broader consequences of ingenuity under fire. By early afternoon on February 21, the volcanic ridges of Iwo Jima had become a chaotic theater of destruction. Smoke hung thick in the air, punctuated by the flashes of artillery and the relentless staccato of gunfire. The Marine who had improvised the aircraft gun pressed forward, now carrying the weight of both mechanical and moral responsibility. Each shot was a calculation, firepower applied precisely, conserving ammunition while maximizing impact. Japanese defenders, disoriented by the sudden introduction of this unprecedented weapon, scrambled to adapt. Small squads attempted flanking maneuvers, tunnels were reinforced, and counterattacks coordinated, but the Marines' presence disrupted every plan. The gun's devastating bursts tore through sandbags, wooden bunkers, and reinforced emplacements, neutralizing threats before they could concentrate against his squad. The terrain itself amplified the effect. Elevated positions allowed for wider arcs of fire, while craters provided temporary cover during repositioning. The Marines squad capitalized on every success. As enemy fire waned from neutralized bunkers, small groups of Marines advanced, clearing trenches and securing footholds. The aircraft gun, though heavy and cumbersome, became a force multiplier. One soldier could hold off multiple defenders, creating breathing room for others to maneuver. Reports from the front lines later noted that his actions prevented casualties in areas that had previously been death traps, highlighting the extraordinary tactical advantage provided by individual ingenuity. Amid this intensity, the human element remained central. Fatigue pressed on every Marine, arms burned, muscles strained, nerves frayed, but determination endured. Witnesses described the Marines' rhythm, a momentary pause to survey the battlefield, a quick repositioning of the gun, a burst of fire, then forward movement. It was not recklessness but disciplined improvisation, a fusion of instinct, training, and courage under fire. The roar of the gun became a soundtrack to both fear and hope, signaling a shift in momentum to those who understood its implications. By late afternoon, the sector had been transformed. Bunkers that had resisted conventional assault were silenced. Enemy troops were either forced to retreat, surrender, or hide in tunnels, now cut off from coordinated support. The Marines' actions directly influenced the battlefield geometry. Paths opened for reinforcements, flanks were secured, and pressure on adjacent units eased. Tactical maps later showed that this single initiative had reshaped the front line in a critical area, illustrating the disproportionate impact one determined soldier could exert. The psychological effect on both sides was profound. American Marines were emboldened, inspired by the display of ingenuity and bravery. The presence of a new, effective weapon in skilled hands encouraged bold maneuvers that had previously been deemed too risky. Conversely, Japanese defenders were unsettled. Their doctrine relied on predictability and fortified positions. Facing a weapon used in an entirely unexpected manner forced rapid recalibration under fire, a near-impossible task given the intensity of combat and the chaos surrounding them. Even as the day drew to a close, the Marine did not relent. Each engagement demanded focus, every shot was deliberate, and the improvisation that had begun as a necessity now became a defining feature of the battle. In multiple reports, squad leaders emphasized that the Marines' contribution had not only neutralized immediate threats, but had fundamentally altered the tactical dynamics of their sector. Positions once thought impregnable had fallen, and the flow of the battle now moved decisively in favor of the Americans. By nightfall, Iwo Jima's volcanic landscape bore the scars of this relentless engagement. Craters, spent ammunition, and destroyed bunkers marked the Marines' path, a testament to the combination of human courage and mechanical ingenuity. The turning point was complete. One man, wielding a weapon never intended for infantry combat, had reshaped the course of a critical battle segment. This moment would not only become a legend among his comrades, but also serve as a case study in battlefield improvisation, demonstrating the power of adaptation under extreme conditions. As darkness settled over the island, the Marine paused, surveying the terrain he had helped secure. The roar of artillery softened, replaced by distant gunfire and the occasional flare of enemy resistance. The battlefield had shifted, but the struggle was far from over. The consequences of this extraordinary day would ripple through the remainder of the Iwo Jima campaign, influencing strategy, morale, and the very nature of infantry engagement. By the evening of February 21, 1945, the initial fury of the battle on Iwo Jima had begun to subside, leaving behind a scarred landscape and a heavy tally of casualties. The volcanic sands were littered with spent ammunition, abandoned weapons, and the remnants of destroyed bunkers. For the Marines, each gain came at a steep cost. Dozens had fallen, many more were wounded, and every step forward demanded relentless courage. Yet amid this grim calculus, the sector influenced by the Marine wielding the repurposed aircraft gun had fared better than most. Positions that had once been death traps were now held securely, thanks to his concentrated firepower and tactical initiative. Commanding officers quickly recognized the impact of this improvisation. Reports noted that a single Marine's use of an aircraft-mounted .50 caliber gun, adapted for infantry combat, had neutralized multiple enemy strongpoints that had previously resisted coordinated attacks. By clearing these fortifications, he not only saved lives, but also allowed his squad and neighboring units to advance with reduced risk. His actions exemplified how individual ingenuity could amplify the effectiveness of a unit, transforming localized engagements into strategic advantages. Japanese defenders, meanwhile, were forced into reactive measures. Bunkers that had been the backbone of their defensive network were destroyed, leaving them vulnerable to American maneuvers. Commanders noted in post-battle analyses that the unpredictability introduced by the Marines' improvised weapon disrupted their defensive doctrine. Squads were disoriented, counterattacks became less coordinated, and the psychological pressure of facing an unexpected, powerful force weighed heavily. The ripple effect of this single initiative extended beyond the immediate sector, subtly altering the flow of the battle across the island. The human dimension of the aftermath was equally significant. Fellow Marines were inspired by the extraordinary display of courage and adaptability. Letters and oral histories recount the morale boost that came from witnessing a comrade take decisive action under extreme conditions. For many, it reinforced a belief in the value of individual initiative and reinforced the lesson that training, courage, and creativity could overcome even the most entrenched defenses. Medical and logistical units faced new challenges. The rapid advances made possible by the Marines' actions meant wounded soldiers had to be evacuated from areas still under sporadic enemy fire. Supply lines adjusted to the changing front. Ammunition and rations reaching areas that had previously been isolated. Yet these difficulties were mitigated by the very gains that had prompted them. Each secured bunker and cleared trench reduced exposure and enabled safer movement for support personnel. Contemporary accounts highlight the Marines' role in shifting both immediate tactical outcomes and broader operational perspectives. Unit reports emphasized that while high command often focused on numerical superiority and artillery preparation. Success on Iwo Jima also depended on adaptive problem-solving at the individual level. The improvised aircraft gun became more than a weapon. It symbolized the intersection of human will, mechanical innovation, and battlefield necessity. As night fell, the sector quieted, yet the consequences of the day's engagements continued to resonate. Casualties were tallied, positions consolidated, and plans for the next day adjusted in response to the altered battlefield. The Marines' contribution was quietly noted in logs and reports, but its true significance was understood by those who had witnessed it firsthand. A single individual, using ingenuity and courage, had shifted the momentum of an entire engagement. The stage was now set for the next phase of the battle. While the immediate danger in this sector had been mitigated, Iwo Jima was far from secure. Enemy forces still occupied vast networks of tunnels and fortifications, and each gain required continued vigilance, tactical innovation, and unrelenting effort. The lessons of this day, both in human endurance and adaptive warfare, would echo through the subsequent operations, shaping strategies, boosting morale, and redefining what was possible on the volcanic battlefield. In the days following the Marines' decisive actions, the broader implications became evident. The secured sector allowed Marine units to press further inland, capturing ridges and bunkers that had previously resisted prolonged assaults. Casualty rates, while still high across Iwo Jima, were mitigated in areas influenced by his improvised firepower. The ability of a single soldier to neutralize multiple fortified positions highlighted the strategic value of adaptive tactics and underscored the importance of initiative in small unit engagements. Command reports later reflected on the lessons learned. The military recognized that traditional doctrines, while essential, could be enhanced when combined with inventive, on-the-spot problem-solving. The Marines' actions were cited as an example of how battlefield ingenuity could achieve disproportionate effects, saving lives and enabling critical objectives. In a war often dominated by large-scale maneuvers and heavy bombardments, these individual acts of innovation proved that flexibility and creativity were as decisive as sheer firepower. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American troops were emboldened by the demonstration that ingenuity could turn the tide, even in the face of entrenched defenses. Witnesses noted a renewed sense of possibility. Obstacles once deemed insurmountable could be overcome through daring, skill, and improvisation. Conversely, Japanese defenders were forced into a reactive posture, their carefully constructed networks disrupted, morale shaken, and defensive strategies strained under unpredictable assaults. The Marines' initiative, though localized, sent ripples of uncertainty throughout enemy lines. Recognition of such acts was often understated in official histories, yet among comrades, the Marines' deeds became legendary. Oral histories, letters, and unit diaries recount the awe inspired by one man's ability to wield a weapon designed for aircraft in close-quarters combat, altering the course of battle in real time. These accounts emphasize not just technical skill, but the human qualities that enabled such action: courage under fire, relentless focus, and the willingness to take calculated risks. The aftermath also revealed the human toll of innovation in war. While the improvised aircraft gun saved lives and enabled advances, its operation placed extreme physical and mental strain on the Marine. Sustained recoil, exposure to enemy fire, and the constant vigilance required to reposition the weapon left lasting marks on his comrades and himself. Many Marines reflected on the blend of admiration and fear it inspired, the recognition that extraordinary effectiveness often came at extraordinary cost. Strategically, the lessons extended beyond the battlefield. High Command incorporated observations from these actions into training programs, emphasizing adaptive thinking and the effective integration of unconventional solutions into coordinated operations. The Iwo Jima campaign, often cited for its brutality and attrition, also became a case study in the potential of individual initiative to influence broader operational outcomes. In this context, the Marines' actions served as a benchmark for innovation. illustrating the critical interplay between human ingenuity and technological application in warfare. By the conclusion of the campaign, the volcanic island had been claimed, but the human and tactical narratives continued to resonate. Historians and military analysts would later highlight that small-scale improvisation, such as the handheld aircraft gun, had tangible effects on morale, tactical advantage, and battlefield psychology. The Marines' actions symbolized a broader truth of warfare. In the chaos of combat, individual courage and creativity could decisively complement strategy, doctrine, and brute force. In the quiet moments after battle, as the island smoldered and the cries of the wounded faded, the impact of these extraordinary actions became clear. Iwo Jima's legacy was defined not only by massed firepower and heroic sacrifices, but also by instances of singular ingenuity. The Marines' transformation of an aircraft gun into a handheld weapon exemplified this duality, the marriage of human courage with technological potential. These events, etched into memory and history, would influence both immediate operations and the enduring understanding of adaptive warfare. Iwo Jima stands as one of the most grueling chapters in the history of warfare, a volcanic crucible where strategy, courage, and human endurance collided. Yet within the vast sweep of this battle, the story of a single Marine turning an aircraft gun into a handheld weapon reminds us that history is often shaped by individuals who refuse to be limited by circumstance. One man, burdened by the weight of a weapon never intended for infantry combat, reshaped the course of a local engagement, demonstrating that ingenuity, determination, and courage can tip the scales even in the darkest hours. The significance of this act extends beyond its tactical success. It illuminates the intimate interplay between human will and technology, showing how mechanical tools designed for one purpose can be repurposed when necessity demands. It is a story of adaptation under pressure, of creativity forged in fire, and of the relentless drive to survive while achieving a mission larger than oneself. On Iwo Jima, the volcanic sands did not discriminate. They tested every Marine equally. The difference lay in the willingness to confront fear, innovate, and act decisively. This Marine's improvisation also underscores the broader truths of warfare. Doctrine and firepower alone cannot guarantee success. Victory often depends on flexibility, initiative, and the courage to embrace risk. It is in these moments that ordinary soldiers become legends, and their actions echo through history, teaching lessons not only in military strategy, but in human resilience. Ultimately, the story is a reflection on the human spirit. In the crucible of Iwo Jima, amid smoke, blood, and chaos, a single act of creativity altered the immediate flow of battle and inspired those who followed. It is a reminder that even in the vast machinery of war, individual agency, courage, intellect, and resolve can leave an indelible mark. One Marine, one gun, unstoppable, a testament to the extraordinary potential of human ingenuity when faced with unimaginable adversity.